No, not yet. Here. Wait. All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Kuf Mem Hey. However, as we've been trying to just get ahead because of tomorrow's Tisha B'Av. So actually, the plan is to, those of you who have to leave early, the plan is to get to the Mishnah towards the bottom of Kuf Mem Vav Amud Beis. So we're basically going to do a little more than a blot. So we got to the Mishnah on Amud Beis of Kuf Mem Hey Amud Beis. So the Mishnah says, Kol Sheba B'Chamim Erev Shabbos. Anything that was basically has been cooked or soaked from Erev Shabbos can remain, can be basically put in hot water. In bishul after bishul, go ahead and put the meat back in because since it was already cooked, you can't cook it again. Obviously, you can't put it if there's if it's on a fire. They can put it in. However, anything that was not already soaked or cooked in hot water from Erev Shabbos, then you can rinse it with hot water on Shabbos. Chutz min hamaliach hayoshan the kulias ha'ispanim, except for this salted fish or kulias ha'ispanim, type of mackerel, also a Spanish mackerel type of fish. Why can't you go ahead and basically rinse that with hot water? Right? Because the rinsing of those cook very easily, very lightly, and therefore just the rinsing of hot water will basically, in essence, cook it, and therefore you can't go ahead and rinse those. Fine. So what soaked in water? So kagoin mai, someone of Safra kagoin tanagola de Rabbi Abba, like the tanagola of Rabbi Abba, he used to go ahead and I guess soak his chicken for days. And Amar of Safra zimni chada iklis lohas motemas of there va'ichlin minay, and I had some of his quote unquote his special dish. We go Rabbi Abba ashkin chamra bar tlosa trafi is nasi. However, if I didn't have the aid of the 3-year-old wine from Rabbi Abba, then basically I would have been, I would have thrown up because that, that soaked chicken was basically disgusting. And therefore, so thank God I had the very, very strong wine, which aided me through it. So, and this was said about Rabbi Abba's meal in Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Yechon, right, mikuse de bava. Oh yeah, so Rabbi Yechon says, well, I spit when I think of the kutach, from Bavel, right? The kutach from Bavel is not a good dish, right? It's like a sort of like a hardened, like a yogurt type of, or oatmeal type of dish that's made. And so he says that was gross. First of all, you guys in Eretz Yisrael have Rabbi Abba's dish, which is completely disgusting. And furthermore, Amarav. So Gaza so Amarav Gaza. Zimni chad iklis lahasam. He says one time I was over there in Bavel, these kusach de Bavel, right? And then I had some of this kutach from Bavel, and shalom yinai kabrichet barva, right? And basically everyone wanted more, right? All the people who were sick wanted more. In other words, so don't say that the kutach in Eretz Yisrael was bad. Rather, everybody actually enjoys the kutach from Bavel. Fine. So that was a little back and forth between the foods of Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. Now. So the Mishnah says anything that was not soaked before, then you can't go ahead and put it again unless you rinse it. But you can't rinse the type of fish that cook very easily. So if you do go ahead and rinse those fish, what's that? So Rabbi Yosef he's like he cooked it. And Amar Berei de Ravina. We also learn chutz mimaliach yashan v'kulios ha'isavim. A Mishnah says, except for salted fish and this Spanish mackerel that the rinsing of it is its gemar malacha. So indeed, learn from here that that's his gemar malacha. Therefore, meaning you're chayav echatas. So yes, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Asi coming to Rabbi Yechon one time. Rabbi Chia bar Abba and Rabbi Asi were sitting for Rabbi Yechon. Yes, Rabbi Yechon coming on. Then Rabbi Yechon was in and out. He was falling asleep. So Amar lei Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Asi. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba, they were talking. Said Rabbi Asi. So he asked him 4 questions. 4 questions. Rabbi Asi. And so he says, what are the reasons why the birds in Bavel are fatter than those in Israel? Right? You think those are fat? Go to the Midbar Aza, go to the by Gaza, and you'll see over there's birds that are even larger than that. So your assumption was wrong. So what's the reason why in Bavel there appears to be more joy during the holidays? Because they're poor. And therefore they're poor. They save up for the holidays, and therefore they all enjoy. And one of the reasons why those in Bavel, the Talmid Chachamim, basically dress up special clothes. Because it's not B'nai Torah. And what's the reason why of the Chavim are Musamim? Why they're considered to be impure? Because they go ahead and they eat creepy crawlers, which basically are tamei, and therefore that gets into their body. However, meanwhile, so those he asked him 4 answers, he gave him 4 quick. He asked him 4 questions, gave him 4 quick answers. However, he said, Rabbi Yechanan, he woke up and he heard sort of what was going on. Samarlu, he said to them, Dardiki. All right, children, like I tell you this, right? Tell wisdom, you are my sister. What does that mean? If something is clear to you and as clear as you as day, just as one is forbidden to have relations with his sister, then you should say it. If not, you shouldn't say it. So in other words, he gave you questions and you really didn't know the answers. So you sort of gave your best guess. That's the answers. Better not to say that. So he says, okay, you want me to, so if that's the case, why don't you tell us the answers? So, okay, no problem. What's the reason why the birds in Bavel are fatter? Because they didn't have to go through a galus, right? If a bird or something, an animal goes through galus, then it's wary on those who go through galus. Shidamar, as the pasuk says. So it says by Moab, it says Ashanan Moab minurav v'shaiketu al shmurav v'gil l'halach. So it says Moab, right? They have been in peace basically since they since their nurav, since their youth, right? And therefore, right, they rest quietly with their shmarav, and they didn't go to galus. In other words, they didn't have to go through galus, and therefore they were not basically. They didn't have to go suffer and through, and therefore they still have the nature from their youth, and therefore we see that so too that the birds, and how do we know that the birds in Israel went through galus, and that's the reason why they're not so fat anymore. At the time we learned the brisa. For 52 years, nobody passed through Yehuda, through the I guess the area of Yehuda. Shinamar, as the pasuk says. So it says over there, right, from the hills, right, that were destroyed, right, now no bird came from the heavens and no animal came through, and behema begematria 50 metarti havin. Behema is 52, so we see that the birds, nothing passed through there for 52 years, so therefore they also went out to go until they came back, and therefore when they came back, so therefore these birds went through exile, and therefore they weren't as fat as the ones in Baba, which did not go through exile. Now, next question. No, before we get to the next question, Amar Rav Yaakov, Amar Rav Yechon, Kulan chazu chutz me'kolei asayis panim. And by the way, all the animals, everything returned except for the fish we discussed earlier, which cooks very easily. Why the marab? Hani Maji the Babava Mahaji Mai Einetum. No, the water returned to Einetum. Bahai came in the Lishar Shidra Le Matzisolik. So, however, since this does not have a shidra, does not have a spine, therefore was not unable to go ahead and swim up, and therefore it never returned up the stream. Now, next question. What's the reason why they're happy? Because they were not in the curse. When the Bnei Yisrael basically was cursed that they would not celebrate their holidays as they used to. See, the pasuk says, so it says, "V'yishbati kol misoisa chaga chadasha v'shabata v'chol moad." So it says, right, and I will end all the happiness, right, during its holidays and its months and its Shabbosim and all its right and its yantas. The Chasiv says over there, "Chadshechem moadechem sana nafshi hayu alai litrach." Right, so it says that their months and their holidays, right, they will be hated to me. Right, and they have become a tircha. And Zamai Havi like litrach. What does it mean to become a tircha? So, right, the bird is Amar Belazar, Amar Rekolish Baruch Lord, and she Lisel Shechaitin Lefanaitzali, the Bnei Yisrael sins before me. Ela Shematrichin Oisi Lieda Eza Gezerah Kasha Avivilhem. Also, they want me to go ahead and basically let them know as to which punishment, which gezerah I will place upon them. Right, and what type of punishments are we talking about during the Moadim? So, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Inachal Kol Regel V'Regel Shalei Basa B'Leshes L'Tzipora. Right, there is no holiday. Right, there is no B'Leshes. Right, basically the visiting armies, they don't come to Tzipora. Remember, V'Chanina Inachal Kol Regel V'Regel Shalei Ba'al L'Tveria Egmon, the Kamton, Obal Smoira, right? And all these Mipnei, in other words, they all come basically traveling during their holidays, and therefore they ruin the holidays because when they come into the towns, they they need food, they need sleep, so therefore they minimize the happiness that's in the during the holidays. Now, and what is the reason why they wear special clothes? Because it's not their place. People say, when I'm in my city, I have my name. My name, people know who I am. However, when I'm not in my city, then it's my clothes that people are able to identify me as a Talmid Chacham. All right, and as the pasuk says, "Habayim Yashish Yaakov Yotzi to Parach Yisrael." So it says over there that those who come from Yaakov from Bnei Yisrael, right, they will take root, and they will go ahead and they will blossom like a flower. So Elo Tani Chacham Shabbav. So Tani Rav Yosef. Elo Tani Chacham Shabbav. Shaisin Tzitzim Brach in the Torah. So these are who's referring to. That's referring to the Tani Chachamim who basically blossom their Torah bubbles. So we see that they do blossom in Torah. And nevertheless, but in order for them, they are indeed Talmid Chachamim, not as you suggested, Rabasi, but however, in order to be identified, because it's not in their place, therefore they need to go ahead and wear special clothes. And finally, the last question is Mipnei Ma of the Chavim Muzamin. What's the reason why they are considered to be basically Talmid? Shelo Yamdu al Har Sinai. They didn't go to Har Sinai. And Shebashash Banachash al Chava, he took Zuma. When the Nachash had relations with Chava, so he basically put Zuma, the impurity within her. And Yisrael Shamdu Har Sinai Paska Zumasan. So Yisrael who went to Har Sinai, therefore they were cleansed from the Zehuma that was given to them from the snake. However, the Chavim Shalei Har Sinai Le Paska Zumasan. However, the Chavim did not stand in Har Sinai, therefore they never had their Zuma cease, and therefore they still remain Tamim. So Gerim, what about Gerim? Because they weren't at Har Sinai. So even though they weren't there, however, their Mazah was there. See, the pasuk says, "As a share yeshnu po imano oimed hayim lifnei Hashem elokeinu." That's a share einena po. Right. So he says, even those who are here today, those who are not here today. So even the ones who weren't here today, he's talking to them. So in other words, their Mazah was still there. Actually, this argues that Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, Dama Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, Ad Shalosh Dara LePaska Zuma Miabaisa. Well, it wasn't up until Har Sinai that the Zuma was still there. Rather, the Zuma went all the way, right? It only went 3 generations, right? And Avram Holi does Yishmael because Avram still had the Zuma because from him came Yishmael, and Yitzchak Holi does Esav, and Yitzchak had Esav. However, Yaakov Holi B'Yudei Shvatim Shaloya B'Han Shum David. However, Yaakov already didn't have the Zuma any longer for the Nachash, so therefore, once it got through 3 generations of Avos, therefore it was no longer there, and therefore they didn't need to come to Har Sinai. Fine. Now Mishnah. So Mishnah says, Shayvir Adam is a Chavis Lechel Hemena Gerugris. A person's allowed to go ahead and break a barrel to eat from it, Gerugris is dried figs. However, you can't go ahead and you can't make a kli. In other words, if your intention is to go ahead and bake the barrel, in other words, that's become a usable kli from now and in the future, then it's forbidden. However, if you're just looking to go ahead and basically destroy the barrel in order to go ahead and have access to the dried figs, then that would be mutter, right? Very similar halachas we have nowadays when it comes to opening packages, right? Or boxes or something that for food content, right? Sure, not to make it into a kli. They noikvin megufa shel chavis, and you can't go ahead and make a hole, right, in the gufa of the chavis, right? In the top, in the cap on top, you can't go ahead and make a hole in that of the chavis. The chavis are matir. We have to explain what's going on in that machlokas. If it like venom mitzada, and you should not go ahead and make a hole on the side, right? The cap is on top. You shouldn't go ahead and make a hole on the side next to it. And if there was a hole, there was a hole there. You can't go ahead and put wax on him because he's smoothing, and which is a malacha on Shabbos. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda one time Maisa came with, I guess there was someone smoothing wax over. Right? I have concern that perhaps he would be obligated to go ahead and bring a chatas. Fine. So the first halacha we said you can go ahead and break a barrel, right? Break open a barrel in order to access dry figs. We're only we're only talking about dry figs. In other words, dry figs. Why? Because how do you go ahead and you cut your dry fig cake? You have to use basically a sharp knife. So therefore, in other words, the only way to go ahead, you're not allowed to go ahead, and since you're taking a knife to cut the dried figs, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and take the knife to go ahead and cut the barrel. But if you weren't going to be using the knife for any other reason, then you wouldn't be able to do it, because according to L'chaira, according to this, we'll soon see the shita is that ein kli nittel el tzarich gufa, right? That you're only allowed to go ahead and use a kli, right, if it was something that you're already using, but you can't use it for another reason. And therefore, if it was loose figs, then loose figs, you don't need the knife for anything. So therefore, you couldn't take the knife to go ahead and break open the barrel. For this law, but you can't go ahead and break open a barrel, right? If you're not going to use the knife, let's say for loose figs or anything else. So maybe a person's allowed to go ahead and drink. He can bring a barrel of wine. Right? So he's allowed to go ahead. He can bring a barrel of wine, and he's go ahead and he can chop open the top with a sword. And he's go ahead and put it in front of his guests, and we're not worried. So now, as we see that a person can go ahead and take a sword or a knife and use it to chop open a barrel, even if the sword or knife is not going to be used for the contents of the barrel. So Rabbanan and Masneis and Rabbi Nechemi. No, so that is the sheet of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold you allowed to go ahead and take the kli as long as it's not muksa, right? You can go ahead and take the kli and use it for opening your barrel. However, Rabbi Nechemi holds you can only take a kli and use it for that which is needed for, right? Only tzarach. And the Gemara says, "Umay duchid Rabbi Yosha loikme masisik Rabbi Nechemia with Jerusalem. Look before us with the Rabbanan. Why is Rabbi Yoshia, right? Why is he so concerned to say, oh, it must be Rabbi Nechemia? We're only talking about dry figs. Just say according to the Rabbanan, you're always allowed to take a sword or a knife or something to break open the barrel. So it says Rava. The Mishnah bothers him. Why my ear the Tani Gogras? At least the Peros. Why does the Mishnah say dafka dried figs? Right? Let go and say Peros, fruits, right? Fruits, obviously, say fruits. Why say dried figs? It must be because we're talking about a dry fig cake. And a dry fig cake, that you need the sword or the very sharp knife to open it. And that's the reason why you're allowed to go ahead and take the knife and open it. But if you weren't going to head and use the knife, then according to Rabbi Nechemia, you would not be allowed to go ahead and use that knife. Fine. So Tanya Chada. So listening Peros. Therefore, it must be that we're talking about it must be talking about, we were talking about a dry fig cake. Fine. So Tanya Chada, we have one price that says Choslos shel grogros shel tmarim matir umafkia v'chaysech. Right? You have a string, a rope that's holding all these figs or dates. You're allowed to go ahead and untie it. You're allowed to go ahead and unravel it, or you're allowed to go ahead and cut it. The Tani, another person says, Matir, you're allowed to go ahead and untie it, but you can't go ahead and unravel it or cut it. So like Kasha, how Rabban Harim Mechemia? One is about the Rabban, and that's another Rabban Chemia, right? According to Rabban, you're allowed to go ahead and take a knife to cut it or to unravel it. And according to Mechemia, you're not allowed to, because once again, kli is only used for something which is permissible to use on Shabbos. The Tani, we're going to Bryce, Mechemia Omer, afilu tarbat, afilu talis, afilu sakin, right? Even any of these things, right? A spoon, right? Or a coat, right? Or talis, right? Or a knife, you can only use those for its intended purpose on Shabbos. So therefore, since I'm going ahead and using a knife for another reason to cut a rope, I wouldn't be allowed to go ahead and cut the rope. And therefore, since I wouldn't be able to go ahead and take the knife to go ahead and open a barrel, it will be usher, but only if I'm taking that knife in order to use it for its proper use to cut the dry fig cake, then I can use it also to open the barrel. Fine. New question. The question is asked Rav Sheshis. Mahu lemivraz chavisa beburta b'Shabbos. So what is the halacha? Can someone go ahead and take a spear, right, and put it into the side of a chavis, all right, into a barrel, right, on Shabbos? So the piece is he intending to go ahead and make a Pesach, and basically he'll basically being a makav patish and going ahead and making a kli, and therefore, since he's making a kli, right, he's finishing up a kli, he'll be aser. Or perhaps he's not coming intending to make a kli, right, or a pet to the kli. Rather, he's just using it to basically, so it will basically maybe pour more generously, pour b'ayin yofa, and therefore be mutter. The piece called kamachavin. He's no, he's intending to make a pesach the aser. It's aser. So maybe we see over here that a person allowed to go ahead and open a barrel, right? And to use a sword to open it, and it's mutter. So the answer is no. Over there, the reason why is ayin yafa. Over here, if he was really doing for ayin yafa, to basically to pour it so more would come out, to be more generous with it, then he would just open from the top. Why is he opening from the side? It must be that he's looking to make a pesach on the side. And then Mishnah says, "Ein noikvin megufa." You can't go ahead and make a hole right inside the cap, inside the top. Div Rabbi Huda and Amar Rav Huna machlekes lamala. Machlekes between right in our Mishnah between Rabbi Huda who says you can't do it and the Chabim who say it's mutter. Right is only lamala. It's only on top. However, aval minatzad. But if it's in the top, right, divrei hakol aser. Right, but then it'll be aser. So it could be, all right, perhaps some of these, like those water cooler bottles, right, where it's sort of like, thin on top, right, where it comes up and you have like, when you turn it over, like the big 5-gallon drums or whatever they are, right? So you have like the little thing on top. So only machlekes is lamala, right? When we're talking about, right, on top of aminat tzab from the side, then divrei kol aser, everyone agrees it's aser, because then you're using it to make a pesach behind the dukani like kiven mitzada, and that's what it says in the Mishnah, right? You look at the next version of the Mishnah, right? The machlekes like kiven mitzada, and then you should put it on the side. So now the machlekes is between Rabbi Huda and Chamim is only with making the hole on top, right, by the cover, by the cap, but by the side, everyone will use aser. And that was the opinion of Rav Huna. And Rav Chi's damar no machlekes minatzad. The machlekes is really on the side, right, of this of the cap right on top. Aval al gaba. But if it's on top, divrei hakol mutter, right? Then everyone says it's mutter. So the Mishnah says you shouldn't make a hole in the side. That means hasam the gufa dechavis. It doesn't mean the side of the cap, in other words, all the way on top. Rather, it means the side of the entire barrel. So in other words, however, when it comes to the top, right, the thin part on top, so there on top would be everyone divrei kol mutter, and on the side, that's the machlekes of our Mishnah, where Rabbi Huda says he's still making a pesach. And the Chachamim say, no, he's not. It's just the existing cover, and right, and therefore it will be mutter. So Taner Rabbanan, ein leikin nekev chadash b'Shabbos v'ibal haisif haisif. A person allowed to go ahead and make a new hole on Shabbos. If he's coming to go ahead and add, then he's allowed to go ahead and increase it. Right, he's allowed to make a smaller or an existing hole a little larger. But yeshayim ein mosif. And some say, no, you're not allowed to go ahead and make an existing hole larger. The Shavin and they both agree that shenaikvi nekav yashan lechatchila, right? But everyone agrees they're allowed to go ahead and make and open an old, reopen, I guess, an old hole. That you're allowed to do. So now, the Tanakama, ma'ishnam in nekav chadash lo. So Tanakama holds. So what's the reason why you can go ahead, right, and that you can't go ahead and make a new hole, right? That was only the Yeshomim, right? The Yeshomim say that you can make a nekev yashan, right, lechatchila, right? So why does the Tanakama hold it's not mutter? So the Tanakama ma'ishnam in nekev chadash lo. So the Kamasakim Pischa, he's making a pesach. So sifi nami Kamasakim Pischa. So when you go ahead and you enlarge an existing hole, you're also making a pesach. So Maraba davar Torah kol pesach she'eno asur lahachnes u'lo haitzi eino pesach. Really, min Torah, any hole, right, that's not really used for in and out is not really considered to be a hole, right? So Pesach has to be something that you use in and out. So let's say we make a hole in the barrel. It's not used to go ahead and put things in the barrel that you put through on top, right? The hole in the side, right, is only used to pour out. So therefore, it's not a real Pesach. And therefore, right? So therefore, by adding to it, he's not really making a Pesach, right? But Rabbanan who the Gazim Mishum Lul Shal Targum. But the Rabbanan are Gazim because a person might go ahead and make a hole in the side, just like they buy a chicken coop, right? Person make a chicken coop. Because over there they do it to bring in fresh air and to take out bad air. Right? And if he wants to go ahead and add to it, he's allowed to go ahead and add to it. Why is that? Right, so you can add it for sure. However, Lul Shal Targolim also Sufi. But when it comes to Lul Shal Targolim, we're not worried about making Lul Shal Targolim even larger. Why is that? Mishum Arishcha, right? Because in other words, if you go ahead and you make a larger hole for the air to go out, then you're going to have rodents and other weasels and stuff come inside the chicken coop. So therefore, if the whole gzera is to make the hole in the side that you're allowed to make a larger. You're allowed to make a larger because we're not worried by a chicken coop. You'll make a larger because over there no one makes a larger. Even some say you can't be meisif. Why? Perhaps he's not going to go ahead and make the hole properly in the chicken coop. And then he's going to go ahead and make it larger and then make it a real hole because that holes by a chicken coop are used basically to have air come in and out. And Darash Rav Nachman Mishum Rav Yechanan, and however Rav Nachman Darshan Rav Yechanan, halach yeshomim, the halach is like the yeshomim that you cannot go ahead and make a hole larger, right? That was the yeshomim, right? Emasifin, right? The hole that you're allowed to go ahead and be meisif to an existing hole. Fine. Next case. To that. The Shavin, and everyone agrees, Shenaikvin Nekvev Yashon L'Chachila. You can go ahead and make an old hole, reopen an old hole, right? That was sealed up. And Amar Rav Yudam Shmuel Loishon Ol Makom Hasu L'Shamer, right? We're only talking about, right, a hole that was that was made l'shamer to go ahead and preserve and to hold on. That was the hole was done there, right? If the hole was put there in order to basically, keep the smell of the of the wine there. But if the reason why they plugged up the hole, right, was to be mechazek, then it's aser. Okay, so in other words, the question is, why was the hole plugged up? If it was, we'll soon see the difference. If it was l'shamer, so therefore it's not a real reopening of a hole, right? Because the hole still existed. But if the plug that was done there was the purpose of a chazek, then it's almost like when a chazek, it's like it was never there before, right? So it depends on how, you're not allowed to make a hole, right? So, but if there is an existing hole, you're allowed to reopen it. But it's only called an existing hole, right? If it was plugged up for l'shamer. But if it was l'chazek, then it would not be. So heichi dami l'shamer, heichi dami l'chazek. What does it mean? So l'shamer, to preserve it, and what does it mean l'chazek? To strengthen the barrel. If the hole that was plugged up was above the wine level, so therefore that was l'shamer, that was just basically to keep the contents of the wine good. And however, but if it was lower than down, then it was l'chazek. Then it was for the purpose of strengthening the barrel, right? Because that was where the liquid was, and therefore we want to go ahead and make sure now that the liquids came out. And Rav Amar, no, even if it's below the water level, that's also called the shamer. So therefore, what's the case of strengthening the barrel? Right? So the bottom of the shmarim, of the dregs that are on the bottom that float to the bottom, so those are very heavy on the bottom. And therefore, if the seal is down there, since the weight of the dregs and everything is on them on the bottom, therefore that is, the purpose of that is to strengthen the barrel. Therefore, if you reopen those, that's like you're making a brand new Pesach. And Tanya Masaylucha, I actually have a brisa that supports you. So by Sasum Yishta Arba Amos, and Paratz is Basumov Ein Lo Arba Amos. So normally by a house, when it shares a chutzner with others, so a person gets his own, even though you share the entire chutzner, but you have the Dalet Amos around your home. So even though you closed up the door, you locked up the door, it's not a usable door anymore, you still got the Dalet Amos around that doorway. However, if you remove the door frame, right, then it was like the door was never there. And by Sasum, similarly to a house, right? However, is not a house, does not go ahead and be matami those things around it, because it's only by the doorway. However, parts is if you go ahead and you remove the door frame and now there's no way to exit a house, then matame kosavo. Then you're matame anything around the house, dalaramas, because then it's like a tomb, right? A tomb is just like a tomb is basically dalaramas around. So to this house, since it doesn't have the entrance and exit anymore, so therefore usually the tumah is just over there by the entrance and exit. But if you seal it off by removing the frames, therefore everything around it, daladamus, would be tummy. So the point is that if you seal up a door completely, right, such as by removing the frames, then it was like it was not there anymore. So too in the case of the barrel, if you seal it up in an area where the dregs were, with the strength, in order to strengthen the barrel, and therefore there's no way to go ahead and reopen that. So therefore, when you reopen it, it's like making a completely new hole, and therefore that was why this price was support for Rava. Fine. Now speaking on another case, so gufsta, when it comes to making a spigot, right, in a hole in a barrel of wine. So Gufsa, Rav Aser, Shmuel Shari. Rav says it's Aser to go ahead and make one on Shabbos. Shmuel Shari, right? And Shmuel says it's mutter, right? So in this case, basically you're putting like a reed, right, like a hollow reed inside the hole, and therefore it's like allows it to spigot to dispense the wine. So Rav says Aser to go ahead and put it in. Shmuel says mutter. So what's the machlokes there? So to go ahead and to cut the reed in order to shape it up into the side, everyone agrees it's aser. Aduri, and one that fell off, and you want to go ahead and put it back to the shari. Everyone says mutter. So the machlokes is basically one that was already cut, but it wasn't exactly perfect. You know, you still have to sort of shape in it in order for it to be a good spigot. Saman de aser says Gezrin de Masa de Michal de Chachila. Says no, we might come to cut a new one. Oman the Shoy one says mutter, to just shape it like Gezrin. We're not guys that he's gonna go ahead and cut another one, and therefore it's mutter to go ahead and do it. And the Gemara says actually Ketanite, I guess machlokes tonight, where we say ein chayskin sheferes b'yamtov ve'ein tzarich lomar b'Shabbos. Person allowed to go ahead and cut a tube on Yantif, and certainly can't do it on Shabbos. And nafla, if it falls off, machzinos Shabbos, you can go ahead and put these reed spigot back in. Ve'ein tzarich lomar b'Yantif, and you don't even have to tell me on Yantif that it's mutter to go ahead and put it back, because you can put it back on Shabbos. Rabbi Yosha Mekel, and Rabbi Yosha is Mekel in this case, and he holds that he is Mekel, and I guess you're always allowed to go ahead and put it back. And Rabbi Yosha, so now the question is, what is Rabbi Yosha talking about? So he says he's Mekel. In which case, Rabbi Yosha, so if he's talking about the ratio where we say you can't go ahead and cut, right, on Yontif and Sully not Shabbos, he's Mekel in that case. So how could he go ahead and say you can cut it? He's making a money. He's making a kli by cutting the reed. So he can't be mattering that case. Safer, rather he's going in the safer. He says you're allowed to go ahead and replace it and put it back in. So the Tanakama nami mishush kashari. The Tanakama was also matter. So what's he coming to be Mekel in? So Ella the Chaticha lo Mizakna Ikabadaya. Rather, maybe cases like this, it's already cut, but it wasn't shaped perfectly. So Mar Savar Gazrina, no Mar Savar Gazrina. So one holds, no, you can't do it. The Tanakama holds it's aser, and then Rabbi Yosha is Mekel and says there's mutter to do. So the Chayr, this would be the same machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. But Rav says it's aser like the Tanakama. Shmuel says mutter like Rabbi Yosha. And Darash Rav Shisha Bered Ravidi Mishmei Rabbi Yosha. And Halach Rabbi Yosha. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosha. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosha that we are Mekel in such a case. Fine. And then the Mishnah says, and he says, if it already was a hole, you're not allowed to go ahead and basically plug it up with wax. So Mishcha, what about thick oil? So Rav Aser, Shmuel Shari. Rav says Aser, and Shmuel says Mutter. Manda Aser Gazin Mishum Shava. Manda Shari Lo Gazin. And one says Aser is because it's just like wax, and therefore you can't smoothen it. It's machik. And the other one says no, it's Mutter because there's no comparison. We're not worried. And I'm related to Shmuel Bar Rav Yosef. The Farish Amartala Mishmei the Rav Mishcha Shari. And actually, we heard the Farish, the Rav Paskin, that to use this thick oil is Mutter, and we're not geyser because of wax. Fine. Omar Tvus Rishba. Omar Shmuel says Tvus Rishba. In the name of Shmuel, Hi Tarfa da Asa Aser, to go ahead and use a leaf, right? A leaf, an asa leaf, right? From Hadassim, right? Is Aser to go ahead and use it to put it in the hole of the, even though it's wider, right? It's not like a reed, right? It's much wider, comes out almost like a gutter. We'll soon see. Is mutter to go ahead and put it in a hole and have the water come out that way. So my time. Huh? So what's the reason? So Rav Yemer Midifti Omar, he says. Gezerah mishum marzev is a gezerah because of a marzev, because of a gutter. One might go ahead and form and create a gutter. Therefore, we don't allow him to use basically this wide leaf in order to go ahead for the contents of the barrel. Ravashi Omar gezerah shamiyikdom. A person might go ahead and pull out a leaf if you were allowed to go ahead and use leaves to create for the spigot. And my benai wasn't afmini, but you de katim menachi, right? If they're already cut, so if you hold you let it cut it, well, we're not where you were going to cut it because it's already there. And the other one says no. If the reason is because you might go ahead and make a gutter system, so therefore there's still reason to be geyser. Now, completely different topic. Bei Sadia. When it comes to Bei Sadia, which is like wearing felt, right? Wearing felt. to use that, and now it's not necessarily clothing, but let's say a person wants to go ahead and put felt on and walk out in the Rav, is that considered carrying or not? So Rav Aser, and Shmuel Shari Rav says Aser, and Shmuel says Motor. So Barachin, if it's Tamasaf wants to claim the Shari, everyone agrees that the really soft felt is just like clothing, therefore it's Motor. Because if it's very hard to claim the Aser, that's if it's very hard, everyone agrees it's considered to be a must, so he's carrying it, then it's not considered wearing it. So keep even they only argue in the middle case. The one holds is also, it appears like it's carrying it. The other one holds, it doesn't look like he's carrying it. And now which Rav says that it is usher to wear this medium type of felt outside. He never said of a ferish. Rather, we observed him and we assumed that was a shita. Why? What happened? The Rav equal usher, the loy habile Rav. Rav was once in a place where there was no area to sit. So Navi Yosef Karmelis, he went outside to sit in the Karmelis, and he saw Rav was outside. It's not proper; he should be sitting there. So Asile Beisadis, they brought him out this medium type of felt to go ahead and sit down. But Yosef, he didn't sit on it, right? So people thought he's not sitting on it. He must be because he thought that they shouldn't have brought it out. They shouldn't have carried it out, and therefore I don't want to go ahead and sit on the felt that was brought out improperly. So the Beisadi also, they thought the reason he didn't sit out because it says Beisadi was also. However, that's not true. Rav Actually, Rav taught this type of felt is mutter to go ahead and wear it out. So why did he sit down? Because of the kavod of other rabbanim who were present, that they weren't sitting, so therefore he didn't feel like it was proper for him to go ahead and sit on a felt. And who these are these rabbanim? That was Rav Kahana, the Ravasi. Rav Kahana and Ravasi, who were both Talmidim of his, but they're also his colleagues, and therefore he didn't feel as proper for him to sit, and they not to sit. And we'll stop here. Everyone should have a wonderful day and an easy tinus. And